Hey y'all, my name is Larson and I want to welcome you to today's lesson. Today I want to make a really short, simple video on counting and using a metronome. This is one of those subjects that for some students I have found is very intuitive, and I explain it once and they pick it up right away. And for some students this is a struggle. And sometimes those students never get past this hump at the beginning of their lessons, and they fall away from lessons pretty quickly. More often than that, though, we figure out a way through this. It can be a little weird, I think, for some of us who, I was a drummer before my earliest memory is that I was a drummer, right? And so for me, hearing a beat and following a beat and subdividing a beat and counting a beat and all of that stuff that is one of the most sensitive senses I have, is my sense of rhythm, right? And that's not like a braggy drummer thing. Oh, I have a sensitive sense of rhythm. It's just my eyes stink, right? And my sense of touch is okay, right? But my sense of like rhythm is something I just feel very innately and always have. But people don't, okay? There are people who are drawn to drums, and we can help them learn how to do this. I've done it, so I am convinced that it is possible. If I can do it, you can do it. Okay, if you're watching this as a teacher, I promise you can teach people how to feel and find the beat. And if you are a student who is struggling finding the beat, I promise you can do this. Your body is full of rhythm. Your heart beats in rhythm. Your blood flows in rhythm. You breathe in rhythm. And some of those rhythms are very regular, and some of those rhythms fluctuate, but it doesn't make them not rhythmic. If you can do this at a basically steady speed, you can do this. Especially since, so for today, we're going to totally just focus on binary counting systems. We are going to talk about quarter notes and eighth notes and 16th notes. Quarter notes are 1 note per beat. Eighth notes are 2 notes per beat. 16th notes are 4 notes per beat. We're going to be working in 4/4. We're going to use a couple different metronomes so we can kind of try and visualize the time in a couple different ways. I'm going to count for you a lot. The first thing to do is find a metronome. You can usually read the reviews, and as long as you don't see a lot of reviews that say things like, this metronome doesn't keep good time, then the metronome is probably fine. Nowadays, you'll see less of that. When app metronomes were first a thing, working with the timing underlying in the phone architecture could be tricky, and so some early metronomes were kind of wonky when it came to their timekeeping, and that's no good. So basically, most metronomes available today are going to be fine on your iPhone or your Android. And there are even a couple website ones. You can also just go to YouTube and search metronome and then put in a tempo, and you'll find a video with a tempo. So there's a ton of different ways where you can find a steady beat to play along to. We're going to start with 120 beats a minute as quarter notes, and we're just going to play quarter notes. So the very first step to take is every time it clicks, I am going to hit the pad. Okay? That's it. I am trying to sync my hits with it. Okay, so like I said, we're in groups of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we're going to do a couple things with quarter notes before we do anything else. The first thing I'm going to do is slow this down. You might think making it harder would mean speeding it up. That's not really the case, especially with quarter notes. Quarter notes would have to get up to like, oh, I don't know, 240, 250 beats a minute before it would even start to be a little tricky, let alone really tricky. Slowing things down, however, so let's drop it down to 80, which this still should be pretty easy. The general rule of thumb is tempos that are faster than your heart rate are generally pretty easy for you to just play. And then once we get below your heart rate, that's where we have to start talking about subdivisions. And we'll get there in a second. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So same deal. I'm just hitting, every time the metronome clicks, I'm hitting the pad, and I'm just using an alternating sticking. If you feel more comfortable using one hand or the other, that is totally cool. Whatever you choose to do, we're trying to make it so you are playing with the metronome. Okay, let's drop it to 60, which is still a tempo that usually is okay with no other subdivision. Feels a little slow though, right? So let's see how this goes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. And same rules apply, right? I'm playing it alternating sticking, but you could use all your right hand, all your left hand, doesn't matter. Just every time the metronome clicks, you hit, okay? And if you hear, let me show you what it'll sound like if you're having trouble. So I'm going slower than the metronome at this point. And every once in a while, my hits are lining up with the metronome. And so I could fool myself into thinking, oh, hey, that one was close, but I was way, way off, right? Likewise, if I go too fast, right? If I go too fast or too slow, I'm going to be phasing against the metronome, right? So I'm going to be gaining a little ground on every beat, and eventually I'm going to lap the metronome. So I'm going to be more than one full beat ahead. And when that happens, that's when I'm likely to line up with the click, and I can trick myself into thinking, aha, I'm back on the click, but no. A thing that'll happen is as you speed up, so let's say this is the tempo, okay? As you speed up, or I'm sorry, this is what we're aiming for. If you rush, okay, you're gonna feel that and you're gonna try and correct. So you're gonna slow down, and the next thing you know, you're gonna be going too slowly. And it might even feel to you like the metronome has changed and the metronome got faster. It didn't, it's because you were trying to slow down, and so the metronome feels fast all of a sudden. So what we're aiming for is here. It's very common to have that pendulum that, oh, I'm going a little too fast and I'm going to try and fix it. Oh my God, now suddenly I'm going too slow. What happened, right? That pendulum will take a little while before it settles into the middle where you can feel comfortable staying with a click. Let's go a little slower. You know what? Let's get really silly. I was going to stop at 40, but let's go all the way down to 30. So this is one beat every 2 seconds. Whoa, super slow, right? Four, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1. Okay, so I was a little loose right there, right? At this tempo, it is tough to play with the metronome. Also, I was trying really hard not to do this thing called subdividing. Subdividing is when you take a beat and you break it into even smaller pieces, okay? What's our first subdivision? Well, so we've been playing quarter notes. If we go 1 note smaller, we cut the quarter notes in half. Quarter notes were 1 note per beat. So we have eighth notes. Eighth notes are 2 notes per beat, right? So what I'm gonna do now to get this subdivision is I'm gonna play the quarter notes with my right hand, and then I'm gonna play in between the quarter notes with my left hand. I'm going to do that without the metronome first to show you how that works. I'm going to do it at a little bit more comfortable tempo than 30, because 30 is super slow. Even when we're subdividing, it's slow. I'm also going to play on 2 different sounds at first so you can hear the notes on the beat and then the subdivisions, the eighth notes. Okay, so I'll start with just my right hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. And see how I'm just putting my left hand right in the middle of these notes. I'm not changing my right hand at all. Right? So if I do that on the same part of the pad now and I get the same sound. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay? This is a very important step. If you have trouble with this step, stay here until it makes sense. Stay until you can keep either your right or your left hand steady and put your other hand in the middle and keep the whole Megillah steady. And then okay? Like I say, this is a huge step because now we're going to go back to the metronome. I'm going to stay at 30 beats per minute. But now I'm going to let myself subdivide. And what that means is I'm in my head, and I'm going to say out loud, thinking about eighth notes, which means I'm cutting this click in half, right in the middle of when one click happens and the next click happens. I'm also picturing another part of the beat, right? So 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, so let's try this a little bit faster. It's going to get way easier faster. So let's go back up to 60 beats per minute, which is now double this, right? And then what we're going to have is our eighth notes are going to be happening at the rate of 120 notes per minute. The beats per minute is still 60, but because now I'm playing twice as many notes as there are beats, 2 times 60 is 120. So now subdividing gets even easier. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and. And remember, a good thing to be able to do, a good check-in for yourself, is can you stop 3, 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. I'm going to go back to the other sound. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1. Okay, let's do this one step faster just so you can really be sure that you got it. And let's take it up to double that. So let's do 120. And now those eighth notes are going to be at a rate double, so 240 notes per minute, not beats per minute, notes per minute. Our beats per minute is still 120, but I'm playing 2 notes for every beat, so 2 notes times 120 beats is 240 notes per minute. So let's start out the same way, just my right hand on quarter notes, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I'm going to put those eighth notes back in the middle, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2, 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 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 4, 1, 2 and 3 and 4 and here they are on the alternate sound. So you can hear that my right hand, right, is still playing with the clicks of the metronome, and my left hand is just playing right in the middle. And that's how I'm able to keep this tempo steady, is because my right hand, every time that clicks, my right hand is playing. I never have any doubt whether I'm speeding up or slowing down, because I can always check in with my right hand and the click. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 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 1. I say this in all my videos, and in this one, well, I always mean it, but if you have any questions about any of this stuff, please ask them in the comment section down below. If you do have questions, please either make it a very specific question or mention like a timestamp if there's something that you're not sure about, okay? Because I do try to get to all the questions that I get, and sometimes the questions are a little unclear and then I can't answer them, and that makes me sad. So I'm going to go back down to 30 beats per minute because I am a crazy person who likes to torture myself. 30 beats per minute is really slow. If you get frustrated at 30 beats per minute, the good news is you are not the first person to be frustrated at 30 beats a minute, okay? We kind of all are. I'm going to start this. Now instead of subdividing it into 2, I'm going to subdivide it into 4. And now we're at 16th notes, right? 16th notes are 4 notes per beat, which means I'm going to have to take the 8th note, the and play that with my right hand, because now I have to play E and with my left hand. So counting 16th notes, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1. Okay, so I still have that 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and I've just put both of those notes on my right hand, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, and put the E and the so now I'm cutting I'm cutting each half in half, and that's how I'm getting 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and. And the same way with the quarter notes and the eighth notes that I was always hitting the number with the click. I still have to hit the number with the click. Okay? My right hand, when I say the number, has to be that click, or else something is wrong. Okay? Let's try this at 40. This one should be even a little easy, at 30. This one should be even a little easier at 30, because now I'm subdividing it into 4. So now I'm playing 120 notes per minute, right? Because I'm playing 4 notes per beat. The tempo is 30 beats per minute, so 4 times 30 is 120. So playing 120 notes, that's usually pretty easy. So all I have to do is keep subdividing that beat into 4 pieces. And because the notes are moving quickly enough that I can play that pretty comfortably, I should be able to get my numbers with the click pretty regularly. Let's give this a try. Wow, that's slow. 4 E and 1 E and 2. Oh, see? I'm letting you see that. It's hard. 30 is slow. You have to stay with it. 3 E and 4 E. There we go. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1. Whew. That's a lot of counting. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Remember, we've still got, at the core of all of this is our quarter note. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then the first thing I'm doing, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and then I'm combining those 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and then I'm cutting those in half. 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 E and 4 E and 1 E and 2 E and 3 4 E and 1. If you're having trouble at this point, this is another one of those points where you really want to stop and make sure that you can count 16th notes steady. The next tempo we're going to do is going to be a good tempo for you to do this at if 30 is too difficult. 30 is very slow, okay? Part of the reason I'm doing 30 is just so you can see what subdividing a slow tempo feels like. If you can do this at 60 beats a minute and at 90 beats a minute, that is awesome. 30 beats is kind of like, you know, the advanced course. Just like super fast would be. 30 is very slow. There's very little music that's actually 30 beats per minute, especially when we're talking about, you know, popular music or even jazz. Classical music, there's a little bit more that's 30, but even then, 30 is an unusual time, okay? So this is kind of, if you can get down into this really slow stuff and feel comfortable, you're doing really well. Let's jump back up to 60. And now, 16th notes, 4 notes per beat, so 60 beats. So 4 times 60 is 240. This is 240 notes per minute. This should be very comfortable from a subdividing standpoint, and it should also be pretty comfortable from a playing standpoint. This shouldn't feel too fast yet. 1 E and, sorry. One E and 1 E and a 2 E. There we go. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a, let's start with quarters. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E, 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E. E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. Two thoughts right here. One is, at the beginning of this lesson, I talked about how if you can do this, you can do this stuff. All I am doing when I hit the drum is an even down and up stroke, so it doesn't really matter what tempo I'm playing at. Right? It doesn't really matter how fast or slow in terms of the physical motion, right? It's a up and a down or a down and an up depending on which technique you're using and how you're thinking about it. I usually think of this as my at rest position, so I'm thinking an up and a down for most of this stuff. But really I'm thinking about when I'm hitting the surface, right? And my hands are kind of taking care of the up and down part, and that's a matter of 40 plus years of doing this and practicing, and so my hands just kind of have their own autopilot for good and bad, but that's a topic for another day. So if you can do this in any sort of even way, then you can totally do this. Another thing I wanted to mention is this last time, if you noticed, I counted 16th notes the whole time, even when I was just playing quarter notes. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. And the reason to do that is because when you're counting the whole thing, you're laying the grid out for you to hear. This is one of those weird things about our brain. When we say things and we hear ourselves say it, that gets into our brain in a different way than if we're just trying to think about it. This is why counting out loud helps. It's almost like you're listening to someone else count. Our brains are weird. And so if I'm counting 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a steadily that whole time, all I have to do is make sure that I hit when I count. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. Let's do this at one more tempo, and then we'll talk about a couple different types of metronomes and a couple different ways to follow metronomes, and then we'll wrap up. So, stop that. So let's double it again and go up to 120. And now, who can tell me what 4 times 120 is? 480. So we're going to be playing 480 notes per minute. Crazy talk. This might feel a little quick. If it does, that's fine. Slow it back down to 90 or 100, whatever. Remember, a metronome is a tool to help you make progress, not a hammer to beat you over the head with, right? You're never supposed to use a metronome to make yourself feel bad, right? You're supposed to use a metronome as a ladder, right? The metronome will be brutally honest with you, and that's an awesome thing, okay? If you're not playing with the metronome, it will not lie to you about that. It has no sympathy. And again, don't use that as a tool to make yourself feel bad and beat yourself up. Use that as a tool to help you climb and make progress, right? That's what the metronome is for. It is, because it is so objective, it is a perfect report card on your progress. If you can play something today at 90 beats a minute, and in a couple weeks you can play it at 110 beats per minute, and you're still playing with, good technique and good quality and good sound and good form and all that, well, that's progress. 20 beats a minute worth of progress, right? And that's the type of progress that in musical instrument studies can be difficult to gauge without something as cold and heartless as a metronome, right? So, love the metronome. It is our friend. It is our helper. Let's try 120. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a let's do that whole thing again. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a I'm going to accent my numbers with the metronome, just so you can see how I'm always aiming for the beat on the number and what I mean by that. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E 4 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 2 3 4 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1. Okay, so that should be, a goal that you have, being able to play 16th notes steady with a metronome, staying with it the whole time at a ton of different tempos, okay? We did from 30 to 120. 30, like I say, is a pretty good bottom. If you can get up to like 180, that's a pretty nice top, especially, if you're in the first year or two of your playing, you can condense that a bit, 40 to 170, say. Like I say, that 30 beats per minute is an awfully slow tempo. As far as fast, well, I mean, go as fast as you want as long as it sounds good, right? And by good, hopefully I mean, the notes are steady, the notes are even, your technique is good, you're staying relaxed, you're not tensing up, all of that stuff, right? That's a given. And then go as fast as you want, as long as you can keep all that stuff. Okay, so with this metronome, this is Pro Metronome, which is available on both iTunes and Android. I have a video just on this metronome. This is my favorite metronome, and there's a few reasons why. But let's talk about what's going on just now. If you notice, I have this pendulum sort of thing. There's a little blue square that's swinging back and forth. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And in its own way, that's kind of like a conductor's baton, right? It is giving me a visual aid as to how long each beat is. You can also, with this metronome, instead of that, you can have a light blink to really call your eye to each beat change. You can also change the sound. One of the ones I like a lot is the actual voice counting.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay. And then the last thing that I use very regularly is subdivisions. The things we were just playing, you can make this metronome play. So I can make it play here. I'll start it and I'm going to add eighth notes. Okay, so here's quarter notes. And 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and here's 16th notes. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E 2 4 1 2 3 4 1. Okay, so this metronome has a lot of cool stuff built in, and that's why I like this. Let's look at the other type of metronome that I really like in terms of being good visually. Okay, the other type of metronome I like, metronome app, is one that simulates the old school app that would like sit on a piano and is a pendulum, right? So basically it's an upside down old style clock, pretty much. I mean, a metronome basically is just a clock. But so they would put the pendulum upside down, so it would be this really helpful visual back and forth, and there was a weight on the pendulum, and the farther you put the weight to the bottom, the faster the pendulum would go, and the higher you put it to the top, the slower the pendulum would go. And this metronome actually has a very similar little doodad. You can see, and I can't grab the weight on here, but I can grab the weight over here and slide it down or slide it up. And see how that has a different visual cue, right? And if you're having trouble following a metronome, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, that visual cue, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 and a 4 E and a. As the pendulum moves, you know that that relates to how fast the beat is happening, right? 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and a 4 E and a 1. And on the digital style metronome I had, there is that light that scoots back and forth. But the old school pendulum, that arm swinging, I find to be a really helpful visual aid in terms of giving you an exact sense of just how fast you need to be moving, because you can see how fast that is moving. Okay? Again, in a lot of ways, for years I've told people that the most difficult skill that drummers will learn is the double stroke technique, to play like a double stroke open roll, and then we use that for a million other things, right? That's mostly true, but the reality is that if you have trouble doing what we just did in this lesson, finding that beat, staying on that beat, counting 16th notes, dagga, 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 keeping that even, having a really good locked-in sense of where the subdivisions are, where the beat is, if that's a struggle for you, that actually is going to be probably the hardest thing you ever have to do as a drummer, which is bad news and good news. And the bad news is, wow, that's a really high hurdle to get over as one of your very first things you have to do when you're learning a new skill, right? You show up, you're like, hey, I want to drum. And the first thing you have to do is essentially learn how to tell time, learn how to feel that rhythm and follow it, and really feel it in your gut, right? That's a lot to have as your, one of your first drum lessons. Oh my goodness, it's this whole conceptual world. Having said that, if that's the case, and you do learn how to do that, nothing ever on the drums again will trouble you as much as that did. So yes, you might have the misfortune of having your biggest hurdle first. But when you get over that hurdle, you'll never bump into a hurdle that will seem as bad. Which isn't to say everything else will be easy. That's not what I mean at all. But the thing that I have found is the students that struggle with this find this exceedingly frustrating. And you will never find anything this frustrating again in drumming. You'll find frustration, absolutely. But if you're having trouble counting and feeling the beat and really internalizing that sense of time, nah, nothing will ever be this frustrating ever again. So you can do simple things too. Listen to songs and tap your foot along with the beat of the song, right? What's a good one? So I'm going to sing poorly for you, which means I love you. So like Pink Floyd, Another Brick in the Wall, right? We don't need no education, right? Just clap along with that beat. We don't need no thought control, right? Just do that. Find a song where you can hear the snare drum really clearly. The snare drum is almost always going to be on beats 2 and 4. Listen, if you're having trouble finding that, listen to some country western music and it will totally be on 2 and 4. And try and clap along with 2 and 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you have trouble with that, you can flip your hand over like I was kind of just doing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. The more music you listen to and the more you can clap along and follow it, the more you will internalize rhythm. Okay? I hope this lesson has been helpful. Like I say, the students that I have that do struggle with this, it is a very frustrating struggle. But I have seen many students who come in and struggle with this right off the bat and get past it and go on to be really advanced players, okay? This is not a debilitating thing, right? A lot of people will say stuff when they want to sing or whatever. People will say, oh, you know, I'm tone deaf or whatever. I don't even want to debate whether tone deaf is a thing for singing, but I'll say this, even people who think they're, like, for lack of a better way to say it, rhythm deaf, okay, maybe, but we can fix it. All right, I have never met anyone who can't find a beat in a song with practice. It's just it's outside my experience. Some people can't do it in their first lesson. That's okay. I've never met anyone who can't learn if they want to, right? It's all on you. Promise. Okay, so that's going to do it. Count. Quarter notes, eighth notes, 16th notes, metronomes, subdividing, clap along with songs. Feel the beat. Know that your breath is rhythm. Your heart is rhythm. Silly stuff. Your hair is rhythm. You are just connected with rhythm all around you. If you go to the beach and you see waves, a lot of times they will have a very regular rhythm, okay? You are surrounded by regular rhythm. You encompass regular rhythm. You can do this. Breathe. That is rhythm. All right, y'all. Thanks for joining me today. This was a little extra lesson, kind of just something I felt like I needed to do for some of the students I'm currently seeing. And I figured I would share it with you all because this is a thing that comes up from time to time, and so I wanted to have a video that I could just point people to and say, hey, let's work on it in our lesson, but then when you're out of your lesson and you're not with me, here's your booster course. But I also wanted to give it to y'all, so if any of you are struggling with rhythm, and if any of you teachers are like, hey, I don't know what to do with students that are struggling with rhythm, don't give up. Rhythm is a thing. We can all learn this. Music is that powerful. I'm going to go because otherwise I'm going to keep preaching. But I hope you liked this video. If you did, I would really appreciate a thumbs up. If you hated it for some reason, my rambly sense of humor, that's a reason, I would accept a thumbs down. If you want to keep up with what I'm doing on my channel, I would appreciate you hitting the subscribe button. Right now we're in the middle of your first year of drum lessons, which is a year-long series about what it might look like if you took private lessons with me. And those come out on Wednesdays and Fridays. Wednesdays we do drum set lessons, Fridays we do drum pad lessons on Wednesday. On Fridays we do drum pad. Wednesday we do drum pad lessons, Friday we do drum set lessons. There we go. It's late, I'm tired. And we're running through rudiments, we're doing lots of drum beats and fills, and just it's a fun time, I think. And so that subscribing to the channel would be a great way to keep up with those lessons. If you're super excited about what I'm doing, you could hit the little notification bell icon and get notifications when I release videos. If you want to catch up with me on Facebook or Instagram, I am at both of those places at Penny Larson Drums. That's going to do it. I hope I'll see you again real soon. I love you guys so much. Take it easy. Bye.